Hello and welcome to the next episode of my series Keyboard and Theory Basics on Synthesizers. So let's start by recapping where we are. Well, we've introduced the concept of key signatures and keys, the names of all the notes, sharps and flats, we've talked about rhythm, we've improvised on a single note, and I've demonstrated some basic improvisation in certain keys. Well, we've described the concept of a key, but let's look at it in a little more detail. Let's take the C major key as an example. So again, that's called a scale. Scales are a good way of familiarizing yourself with the keyboard. What happens if I play that scale and I add one of the other notes? So in this case, the note had a quite different sound. It didn't sound terrible, but it sounded out of place. Let me try another one. So again, it sounds out of place in the key. Let me improvise a little. So somehow I made that work, but that was an out note. Let me try again. So that sounded a little bit strange when I introduced it. How a note sounds depends on what we call the harmonic context. The harmonic context is usually the key of a song, but not every song has a single fixed key, and sometimes the key moves around. That's called a key change, or in some contexts, like in bebop, you follow the key of the chord that is being played underneath you. So, what does it mean then to use a particular note in a key, and how do they sound with respect to one another? Some of them are stronger in the key, some of them sound more at home in the key, some of them sound more natural in the key, some of them sound less natural in the key. Music theory gives us a way of describing those in and out tones. It's not prescribing which ones you should play, it's simply giving you an understanding of which ones feel natural and harmonious and which ones feel dissonant and inharmonious. You're free to use any of them as you choose. When playing a scale like this, you can find that certain notes, even in the C major scale, sound better or worse against chords in the C scale. I'm not going to play chords, but let me describe a little bit about that. So let me play. So to me, and I know this from a theoretic perspective, but the B and the F sound a little less in place in those riffs than the other notes. One could say that those are weaker harmonically in the context of the scale of C major. That weakness or strength relates to how close they are to the harmonics of the root. Now we don't need to go into that for now, and I'm going to talk about that a little when we talk about the circle of fifths. But it suffices to say that a 7-note scale, each note is not equally at home. And what we can do is we can discard the 2 least well-fitting notes and only use the remaining ones. In fact, we could choose to discard 4 of them and only use 3 notes. So if we only use 3 notes, I'd say only the F, the G, and the C maybe. That might be what we chose to play. It's a bit of a strange choice, but we can pick any subset. But there are specific subsets making 5-note scales, which are commonly called the pentatonic scales. Now we've introduced the concept of a major and a minor key, and there are corresponding major and minor pentatonics. But why would you use a pentatonic? You would use a pentatonic because harmonically every note is very compatible with every other note. So that means if you are writing two melodic lines, you don't particularly have to pay attention to which notes the other line is playing, as long as you stick to a pentatonic scale. So pentatonic scales are one of the ways that many musicians will improvise freely. Guitarists do this, pianists do this, and many instrumentalists will, because as long as you stick to the pentatonic of the key, it will sound compatible and harmonious with any of the chords associated with the scale. So let's look at how you construct a major pentatonic scale. Well, I can tell you that the major pentatonic of C is C, D, E, G, A, and then we're back to C. So what did I do? What I did was I got rid of the perfect fourth and I got rid of the major seventh. So I played those in random order and it didn't sound too bad. In fact, more than that, let me try this. So I'm turning on the arpeggiator of the synth and it's going to play the notes that I play. It's going to select them in random order and play them with some rhythm. So now I'm going to add the other two tones. I hope you noticed that the melodies that it switched to playing sounded a little bit stranger when we introduced those other notes, whereas they sounded quite natural when I didn't introduce them. That is the power of the pentatonic scale. There is another pentatonic scale, well there are more, there are 5 pentatonic scales by the normal convention, but we're going to talk about that was the major pentatonic. Now we're going to talk about the minor pentatonic, so let's think. C minor. So which notes do we get rid of? Well, I happen to know you get rid of the second and you get rid of the sixth. So this is the major second, we just drop it. And this is the minor sixth, we just drop it. A quick aside, sometimes rather than calling it a minor sixth or a major sixth, what people do is they use the number to refer to the major intervals. So in other words, if I say a sixth, I mean a major sixth, and then I say a flat sixth. So I called this a minor sixth, that's the more traditional music theoretic specific interval. But you could also call it a flat six. So you could say this is a 1, this is the major third, that's the minor third, but we can say the 1, the flat 3, the 4, the 5, the flat 7, and back to the C. So, as I said, in order to construct the minor pentatonic, we get rid of the second and we get rid of the flat 6. So we only play this applies to all of them, so let's try the A. We skip the second, we play the third, fourth, fifth, skip the sixth, play the seventh. You may notice that the A minor pentatonic actually used the same notes as the C major pentatonic. This is not a coincidence. In the same way that the 7-note C major scale and A minor scale are relative major and minor, the pentatonic are equivalently major and minor. They're equivalently major and minor relative. So, what can we do with this? Well, let's experiment. Let's try and play another improvisation, but this time I hope you will feel comfortable enough to try and play along yourself. So I'm going to start a drum beat and I'm going to improvise in, should I pick a different scale? Let's improvise in F minor pentatonic. So, fairly simple, nothing complicated again, but I think you get a feel for it was quite easy. I didn't really have to think about the order I was playing. When I demonstrated randomizing, it still worked quite well. Let's now play in a major pentatonic. Let's play in D major pentatonic. So just to illustrate the thinking process, typically I already know which notes are in these scales, but let's show the process. So D, I know the scale of D has 2 sharps, and I know if there are 2 sharps, they will be F and C. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I need to use the 1, 2, 3, not 4. 1, 2, 3 rather, not 4, and I use the 5 and the 6. So those are the notes in the D major pentatonic. So let's try. Okay, so I chose melodic lines which sort of moved up and down, followed scales upwards and downwards, but as I demonstrated previously, randomization here is potentially acceptable. The only problem with randomization is that a randomized melody will probably not make its way back to the root. So if you randomize the melody, there can be ambiguity. So when I said the major pentatonic, well, what else could we refer to that as? We could also call that B minor pentatonic. You may wonder how I immediately knew that those were the relative major and minor. It's because the relative major to a minor key is 1, 2, 3 chromatic steps upwards, or 3 half steps as you might call them, or you go down 3. So if I know how to play, say G major, I know it has 1 sharp in it, then I can go 1, 2, 3, and I can play E minor using the same notes. So for example, or starting at E, E minor. That was kind of an aside, but I thought it was a helpful one. So, hopefully this episode has been useful to you. Hopefully the series has been useful to you. I hope you will join me for some more episodes where I go a little bit more in depth into music theory and we experiment a little bit more with improvisation and other features of a keyboard which may be of interest to you. But in any case, thank you for watching and goodbye.